All right, hey, what's up, guys? This is Biggs, and today we're going to be talking about some of the more advanced topics in UMK3. I really meant to make a really nice edited video about this maybe about a year ago, but I was just so busy up until recently. This was going to be one of the first videos in a series of videos I was going to put out leading up to the Ohio UMK3 tournament. But if you haven't heard already, that tournament was postponed due to what's going around the world recently. So I'm just going to do this little voiceover video because it's pretty long overdue. So, like I said, today we're going to be talking about some of the more advanced topics in UMK3. Namely, those are going to be sprites, collision boxes, frames, frame advantage, and glitch canceling. So, I'm going to try and come up with sort of present a kind of grand unified theory that kind of unifies all those subjects into one thing and relates them all. So right here in front of us, you can see we have a spreadsheet of reptiles frame data. Some things to notice on here, I only have the startup listed, but in this video, I will give you some ideas on how to calculate some other values. But to notice on the startup column right here, you can see that each entry is prefixed with 3 plus. This signifies that the version of MAME that we currently use, MAME32++119, has 3 frames of lag in comparison to the arcade version of the game. Another thing to note is that arcade UMK3 usually runs somewhere between 53 and 54 frames per second. It runs at a fractional value between those two. But when you play the emulated version, it kind of rounds it up, so it always runs at 54 frames per second. So that's just something to note right there. So this is just the frame data, and now I'm going to go in game and show how I actually calculate these values. So let me switch to the game. All right, so here we are in game, and how you actually calculate these values, usually on MAME, when you press the P button on your keyboard, it'll pause the emulation. So I press P and it pauses the emulation like so, and then if you pressed Shift and P at the same time while it's paused, it'll perform a frame advance. So I press Shift P, I've just advanced the game emulation 1 frame. So I'll press it a few more times so you can actually see the characters moving 1 frame at a time. So they move very, very slowly 1 frame at a time. So that's basically what we're going to use to calculate frame data. So if I want to calculate the startup of a move, I literally have to count the frames. So I press P, pause the game, press and hold the button that we want to calculate the frames for. So I'm going to choose high punch. So I'm going to hold the high punch button and then press Shift plus P to get a 1 frame input on that attack. So I'm holding high punch, Shift plus P. So I've advanced the game 1 frame with a 1 frame input of high punch. So that was the input frame. And then, like I said before, this version of MAME has 3 frames of lag. So I should be able to advance the game 3 frames and Ermac is not going to move. So I'll press Shift P 3 more times. 1, 2, 3. And you can see he hasn't started doing the attack yet. So on this next frame, the attack startup will actually begin its animation. So there on the 4th frame, we see that Ermac has moved right there. And then you can start counting all the frames after if you want. So that's basically the main idea for calculating frame data. So if I wanted to check the startup on this high punch, I would go over to the other Ermac and I'd press pause, hold high punch, Shift P, that's a perfect 1 frame input. Then I press Shift P 3 times to get the lag. So 1, 2, 3, 3 frames of lag. Then I start counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, etc. So I was a little off right there, so I'm going to move a little bit closer. So press pause, input high punch, Shift P, 1 frame perfect input, 1, 2, 3 frames of lag, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can see it hits on the 10th frame right there. So that's how we figure that the startup is 3 plus 10 frames. Now, I'm going to start talking about sprites and how they affect frame data calculations and also that. So sprites are just graphics in a simple sense. The definition of a sprite is just a graphic that's drawn on a screen somewhere. So characters are sprites. We could think of their attacks, animations as being sprites. So that's a sprite. This is a sprite. The fireball, the character itself is a sprite. But the main sprites we're going to focus on in this video are the actual character model, so that's Ermac himself, and then we're going to look at the shadow on the floor in the background, the little black shadow back there. So that is those are the two sprites we're going to look at. I'll refer to just character's sprite as just being the sprite, and then the shadow sprite as being the background. So one thing to notice in UMK3 that's very interesting is that the shadow in the background is always one frame ahead of the character's model sprite. So if I were to do any movement or attack, the shadow will move one frame before the character does. So like I said before, I'll demonstrate this with the lag in UMK3. So I'm going to press pause and we're going to enter high punch, perfect one frame input. And like I said before, UMK3 on this version of MAME has 3 frames of lag. So when I press frame advance 3 times, watch what happens. 1, 2, 3, and look, on the 3rd frame advance input, the shadow in the background has moved. So that means on the next frame, since the shadow moved right there, Ermac's character sprite is going to move. So this is the next frame and Ermac moves. So I'll demonstrate that one more time. Pause the game, input high punch. 1, 2, 3, the shadow moves. Now the next frame, Ermac's character model is going to move. There we see it right there. So this is very useful because it lets us define startup in a way that is independent of the engine lag for the emulation. So some MAMEs have different amounts of lag. This one happens to have 3 frames, but some MAMEs run slower, some MAMEs run faster. So we can define startup in such a way that's independent of lag, as maybe one definition could be the amount of frames after the shadow moves until the attack hits. So we just start counting frames after we see the shadow move, and when the attack hits, we stop. So that's basically what we did before, but we just used the number 3. But let's say we're on a different version of MAME, we wouldn't even have to count the amount of frames of lag. We can just see when the shadow moves, then we start counting. Another thing to note, like I said, that the shadow will always move 1 frame before the character model. That happens when you get hit as well. So I will demonstrate this right here. Pause the game, input high punch, 1 frame. 1, 2, 3. You see the shadow moved in the background for player 1. Now watch what happens on the 9th frame, which is going to be the frame before the attack hits, to the player 2 sprite. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And see in the background, the player 2 sprite got hit. That means the next frame, player 2 is going to get hit as well, like so. So I'll demonstrate that one more time. Input 1, 2, 3, that's the game lag. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Look at the background, he got hit, the shadow got hit, and then he gets hit on the next frame, like so. So that's pretty much how we use the shadows and the sprites to calculate some frame data. And now I'm gonna go on and show the relationship with frame data and collision boxes. So I'm going to pause the game right here, and we're going to take a look at a nice little post on TYM by Core. So Core did this post on TYM. The original post was in Russian on VK, but he put it on TYM later in English. So this is detailed test of low punch and high punch jabs. He basically made this very useful chart that's used by a lot of people who play competitively. But the real interesting part we're going to look at is his methodology right here. he uses collision boxes throughout this post a lot for his explanations. So one thing to note, UMK3 has 3 collision boxes. Usually in modern games, you really only see the general 2, the hurt box and the hit box, but UMK3 actually has a third one called the push box. So a collision box is just a region on a sprite that detects its collision with another sprite's region. So not all sprites have collision boxes, but the ones that we care about do. So all the collision box does is determine if it collides with another sprite for that region. So generally speaking, if you've played any other fighting game at a competitive level, you know that the blue region right here is the hitbox and the red region is the hurt box. And then down here, this is something specific to UMK3. The push box is this little white box right here. This is not very important for the explanation in the video, but I'll just mention it for people who want to learn more about push boxes. You can come look at this post on TYM. I'll put the link to the thread in the video description. But like in general, most games, the hitbox is the region of the attack that you're doing to hit the opponent. So if your opponent comes in contact with this region, they'll get hit. And then the red portion is where you can get hit by attacks. So some games have collision regions as circles. UMK3 has them as rectangles, like most games. But let's say you play a 3D game, they might be spheres, like Tekken uses hit spheres instead of hit boxes. So that's just something to note. UMK3 just uses regular old hitboxes. So I'm going to go back to MAME right here. So in Ultimate Cup edition of UMK3, you can go into the options menu by pressing F2, go to the cheat submenu, and turn on collision boxes right here. So I'll turn them on, and then let's reset the game and pick our characters again. So we're gonna pick double Ermac. And now when we do attacks, we'll be able to see the collision box. Okay, so right here, when we do an attack, the collision box will be drawn on the screen. We can see right there. So I'm doing high punch. The blue box is my hit box, and then the red rectangle is going to be on the opponent's hurt box. So one very important thing that you may not have noticed unless you pay a lot of attention to frames in this game is that the hitbox is going to be drawn on the exact frame that a move becomes active. So if we press pause, I'm going to go up to the opponent and press pause. Then we're going to input high punch. Hold high punch, press Shift P, we get the perfect 1-frame input. And then we're going to press Shift P 1, 2, 3 times. That's the lag because we see the shadow move on the background. And then we're going to start counting. It should come and hit the opponent on the 10th frame, but we'll watch what happens on the 10th frame. So 1, oh, hold on. Let's do the far away high punch. So press pause, input it. There we go, input frame 1, 2, 3. And there we have the lag. Now we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So look at that. On the 10th frame, the hitbox is redrawn. So that is the frame that the attack becomes active right there. So this is very useful because not necessarily all attacks will hit the opponent due to breathing hitbox issues. So maybe the opponent is moving back and forth like they do in the idle position. So your attack may not hit on the first frame. Or maybe you're doing a projectile like this that travels across the screen. So it's going to hit the opponent on the later active frames of the move, but you may want to see when it initially becomes active. Or you do a move which hitbox expands, like Cabal Spin or something like that. So this lets you calculate the exact startup of the move when the move will become active without it even having to hit the opponent. Another thing I'm going to mention before we move on from collision boxes, I'm going to go back to the shadows on the background. So I mentioned before that we can calculate other values using the shadows other than startup. So for example, I'm gonna press pause and input high punch. So that's the input frame. And like I said, we are gonna define the startup so that it is lagless. So we're gonna skip the first 3 frames, or we're gonna count until we see the shadow change in the background. So the shadow has changed, therefore we're gonna start counting for startup. So now we're gonna count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there we see the hitbox is drawn. So now the startup has ended and the move has become active. Now we can use the shadow in the background to sort of figure out other values of the move. So like I said before, the shadow is always 1 frame ahead of the character sprite. So let's say we want to calculate the duration of this move, or the active frames is another way of saying it, the active frames. So we're going to start counting from here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So I see 4 frames and the shadow has moved back. So that means on the next frame, the punch is going to go back on Ermac's animation and the move's no longer going to be active. So there we go. So maybe it has 4 or 5 frames of active frames. And then we can count the number of frames until the shadow goes back to the idle position. So it's already 1 frame at this point. So 2, 3, 4, 5. So you see 5, the shadow has gone back to the idle position, and now Ermac should go back to his idle position as well on the frame after, because the shadow is always 1 frame ahead. So that's how we can figure out some other values other from startups, such as active frames, recovery, and then we would add those all up for the total duration, I guess you could say. So now I'm going to move on to frame advantage, because it's very important when you calculate frame data to always have your character be at frame advantage. That way your values are consistent and they're not off by 1 frame or not. So in UMK3, frame advantage is determined at the start of every round randomly, and it's assigned to one of the players. So this is, I guess you could say, an improvement from newer games, even though UMK3 came first. In newer games like MK9, player advantage was always assigned to the first player. So when you got in tournaments, people would be fighting over who would get to sit on the first player in order to get the player advantage. Well, in UMK3, it's assigned randomly at the beginning of the round, and you don't really know who has it, but there's some ways to figure it out. So player advantage is really the most important thing to understand in UMK3 as a high-level player. It basically determines so much of the fight that's going to happen, because so much of the meta in competitive UMK3 is driven around jabs. So you're going to be fighting, jabbing, trying to out-jab your opponent, and you're not going to be able to do that if they have frame advantage. So you're going to want to switch up your strategy to not fight them with jabs so much and kind of play different. But you have to be able to recognize if you have frame advantage or if they have frame advantage. So the most easiest way to determine if you have frame advantage is just to do the simple punch test, and that's pretty much the definition of frame advantage. So if I go to Ermac and we both press the same button at the same time, whoever wins is going to have frame advantage. So you can see player 1 is winning because we're pressing the button at the same time, and I always win, therefore I have frame advantage. So just based on that definitive test, pretty much the definition of frame advantage, you can see why that's really important. So if we both press a button at the same time, I'm always going to win. That's kind of messed up when you really think about it. So that's one way of telling if you have frame advantage, but that's not very useful in an actual fight, because let's say you need to press the button at the same time as the opponent. So timing your attack to press the same time they do it when you have no idea when they're going to press the button is pretty much impossible. So there's some other ways to figure this out that are kind of helpful, but not very, but I'll go through them right now. So I'm going to turn off collision boxes for a second, just so we can see this a bit easier. So I'm going to pick my characters again. Okay. So one of the ways you can determine if you have frame advantage is also by looking at the sprites. So here, for example, we're going to see who has frame advantage by punching at the same time. So you can see player 2 Ermac now has frame advantage. It's randomly assigned at the beginning of each round. But one way we can see this is without even having to get hit by an attack. So we could press a different attack like high kick and we can't block cancel that. So we may be in a pinch to see who has the frame advantage, but we don't want to risk doing like a high kick when we can block cancel low punches. So we can actually test this without having the attack even hit. So notice, when I press these low punches at the same time, look at Ermac's arm. Do you notice anything right here? His sprite on player 1 is overlapping the sprite of player 2. I'm going to pause the game and we're going to do a frame advance so you could show it. So I'm going to input low punch, 1, 2, 3 frames of lag, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So here we can see player 1's punch, the arm, the sprite of the arm is overlapping player 2's. So that means since it's overlapping, the sprite was drawn later on the screen, so that means the attack came out slower. So we can easily tell without even having the attack hit that player 2 has frame advantage, and then we go closer and player 2 is always hitting us. So that's one way of telling is just by overlapping sprites like that. So now I'm going to go back and turn on the hitboxes to demonstrate another thing. So let's start the game. Okay, so we want to see who has the frame advantage. So we're going to punch at the same time. It looks like player 1 has it now. Now I want you to notice something else. With the collision boxes we have now, remember I told you the collision box is drawn when the move becomes active. Well, what happens when you press the same button at the same time as your opponent? If your opponent's collision box becomes active after yours, the box is going to be redrawn on the screen. So basically, if I mash the collision box punches and we're going to see the collision box, if I have frame advantage, my box is never going to be drawn because the opponent's attack's coming out later and his will always get drawn after and redraw it on the screen. So watch. So player 1 has frame advantage, and look, my hitbox is never being drawn for my attack, but player 2's is always being drawn because his attack is happening later, so the box is getting redrawn on the screen. So look at that. So if you have player advantage, your hitbox is never going to be drawn if you do the same attack as your opponent at the same time. So that's just another way to tell if you have frame advantage, just for testing purposes. And like I said, it's very important to determine who has frame advantage when calculating frame data because you want to be consistent and you only want to use the characters who has frame advantage to calculate their frame data. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the last topic, which is glitch canceling. And this is going to be the most difficult one to understand, but I will kind of give a historical context for this. So glitch canceling in the historical context, they really did not understand what glitch canceling really was or like what caused glitch canceling up until about 2009, 2010-ish. Before they understood one of the applications of glitch canceling, that's how it really got its name. Glitch cancel, when you think about the main application back, let's say you were on UMK, Ultimate MK, maybe in 2007 you would see combos where people were breaking hit limits of special moves by canceling them really fast. So that's how it really got the name glitch cancel. But when you think about it, they really had no idea what was happening. They just understood in the past that sometimes you could break hit limits on combos, and sometimes combos would work and other times they wouldn't. And they basically called this phenomenon glitch canceling. They really didn't have an understanding of why this happened until about a decade ago, maybe. So I'll demonstrate right here. Ermac, for example, he has the TKS, telekinetic slam, or the lift. So if I do lift, you can see right here, lift usually will lock on the 5th hit. So I can do 4 hits before a lift and the lift will still come out, but if I do 5 hits, then the lift will lock and it won't come out. Now, if you have glitch canceling active, you can actually do 5 hits and frame perfect cancel the lift and the lift will come out as if it is allowed, even though technically by the game standards, the rules in the game will not allow that normally. So I'll do play a video to demonstrate this. So let's go back here and I'm going to play this combo by Dead. This is a recent combo video from Dead from Ermac. So you'll see here that he's going to do 5 hits and do a lift right after 5 hits, and normally this is not allowed. So here's the combo. There's 2 hits. The lift doesn't count as a hit. There's 2 more, and then that jump kick was the 5th hit. And he still got the lift after it. So I'm going to play it back at a slower speed. So let's put this at half speed. So you can see right here, 1 hit, 2 hits. The lift does not count as a hit. 3 hits, 4 hits. The jump kick is the 5th hit, and then he cancels the recovery of it into a lift, frame perfect right there. He was able to break the hit limit. So that is basically the historical application of glitch canceling. They used it to break hit limits. But today, we understand that glitch canceling is actually far more applicable in matches than it was basically trying to do a frame perfect cancel for a combo video. It's actually very applicable and practical to do in matches in some scenarios for different things. So sometimes you see me reference this chart. Let me go back here. This relaunch chart, I've referenced this in other videos. So you can see right here in the legend at the bottom, green, the relaunch is possible no matter the glitch cancel, and yellow is possible only if you have glitch cancel active. So basically what this is telling us is that if you have glitch cancel, you get access to certain combos that normally are not possible. And I'll explain why this happens later, but for now, let's just look at Cabal's vertical right here. So if we look at Cabal, he can relaunch Jax, Cabal, Nightwolf, Sonya, and Unmasked Sub only if he has glitch cancel active. So when you think about that, if he has frame advantage, he can't relaunch them. So if you think about tournaments, that's very important for corner positioning and getting optimal damage and stuff like that. But I will go back and explain basically why this happens. So if we go back in game, and we're going to see who has glitch cancel. So player 2, or I guess I haven't explained this yet. So like I said before, they haven't, in the past, they didn't know what caused glitch canceling, but we now know what causes it about a decade later. So this is basically the fundamental theorem of UMK3. Basically, at the start of the round, frame advantage is determined for the player, and also glitch canceling is determined for a player as well. So if one player has frame advantage, the other player will automatically get glitch cancel. That's how it works in UMK3. It's the fundamental theorem of UMK3 is that one player has glitch cancel and the other player will have frame advantage. You can't have both at the same time. One gets one and the other gets one 100% of the time. So how we test for this is basically the same way as how we test for frame advantage. So if we go here, if I punch and you can see player 1 is hitting player 2 before his punch comes out, that means player 1 has frame advantage, and that also means player 2 has glitch canceling active. So the main thing to understand why glitch canceling makes combos work, when you have glitch cancel active and your opponent hits you, you will recover 1 frame faster than normal. This is very important to understand if you are going to understand why certain combos work and not. It all goes back to the sprites, like I said before, but basically your sprite is going to recover 1 frame faster if you have glitch canceling active and you get hit. So I'm going to play a nice video by Core that's going to explain the application of this in some Nightwolf combos. So Nightwolf, he has axe combos where he does a loop of axes when he juggles you, and on male ninjas, if the opponent, or not just male ninjas, other characters too, but basically if the opponent has glitch canceling active, they're going to recover 1 frame faster on hit. Therefore, the axe is not going to hit in its frame perfect juggle. So right here, he's going to demonstrate that glitch canceling, when you get hit and you have glitch cancel, you will recover 1 frame faster. So he does the jump test to prove this right here. You can see that the Sub-Zero on the right has glitch cancel, and he's higher in his jump animation than the one on the left, even though they got hit and jumped at the same time. The glitch canceled Sub-Zero actually recovered 1 frame faster on hit. So Nightwolf's combos, when he juggles axes, if your opponent has glitch cancel, they're going to recover faster and the combo's not going to work. So this is what he demonstrates right here with Cabal. The second clip had Cabal with glitch cancel, and the Nightwolf axe combo whiffed. So when you understand why certain combos work with glitch cancel and some don't, it's not really about if you have glitch cancel. It's really about if the opponent has glitch cancel. And that's something that's kind of hard for people to understand. Since the opponent is recovering 1 frame faster when they get hit, it really only matters if they have it, not if you have it. But since how UMK3 works and the relationship between frame advantage and glitch canceling, if you have glitch cancel active, that means your opponent doesn't have glitch cancel active. Therefore, your combo will work on them because they will not recover 1 frame faster on hit. So that's just the main idea to understand right there. And I'm going to demonstrate, like I said before, the same test for glitch canceling. You do the punch test, like I said. So if your punch doesn't win and you do it at the same time, then that means you have glitch canceling. But also the other tests still apply. So we can do the overlapping sprite test. So if your sprite overlaps your opponent's sprite, that means you have glitch canceling active. So we can see the player 2 Ermac sprite is overlapping player 1, so he has glitch canceling active. Also, we have the hitbox test as well. Remember how I said if you have player advantage, your hitbox won't be drawn if you do the attack at the same time as your opponent. Well, it works the same way with glitch canceling. If you have glitch cancel, your attack will be drawn if you do your attack at the same time as the opponent. So I'm going to match the attack, and notice player 2's hitbox is getting drawn, so that means he has glitch cancel active. And we can reiterate that with the punch test if you weren't going to believe that. So that's pretty much it for that. I'll go through one last thing. If you are playing on Ultimate Cup on the newest version, if you press F2 and go to the options menu, you can go to the cheat submenu right here and then click training mode, and you enter that. You can pick the delay. We're just going to do 0-frame delay because we're playing offline, sorry. And when we do that, it'll actually let us select which character has frame advantage before the round starts. So this is very useful, so you don't have to keep restarting the game. So let's say I'm just gonna select 2 characters. And before the match even starts, it'll ask us what character we want to have frame advantage. So this is very useful. So we can choose player 1, blah, blah, blah. And like I said, the relationship between frame advantage and glitch canceling, if one player has frame advantage, the other player will automatically have glitch cancels. So since I made Reptile have frame advantage, Jade is going to be able to glitch cancel in this scenario. So that's pretty much it. I hope you guys learned something new. If you have any questions, please put a comment down. I'll try and answer it. And like I said, the main things to take away from this video, shadows move 1 frame faster than the character sprite. Hitboxes are drawn on the frame that a move will become active. Overlapping sprites can help determine who has frame advantage. And then frame advantage, the relationship between frame advantage and glitch canceling. And then, you know, frame advantage, one player has frame advantage, the other player will have glitch cancel active, and then that when you have glitch cancel active and you get hit, you'll recover 1 frame faster. That's why combos work. So like I said, if you have any questions, please put a comment down and I'll try and answer it. Thanks for watching, guys.